Welcome. Glad to have everybody with us today. And we are very fortunate to have with us our guest, Kate Sullivan, who is the Director of Marketing at the Philadelphia Airport. And she is joining my colleague, Raghu Iyengar, who is the Director of the Wharton Customer Analytics. And I'm also a professor at the Wharton School in marketing. And we've been running this series of interviews of how different companies and individuals are managing through this pandemic. And as I say, we've got Kate Sullivan who is with us from the Philadelphia airport. And I will say that there are few industries that have been affected more than travel. And so it'd be fascinating for us to learn what's going on at the Philadelphia airport. So Kate, let me turn to you and get us started. And let's begin with understanding some of your background and how long you've been in your current position.
Sure. Yeah, I've been at the Philadelphia International Airport and Philadelphia Northeast Airport for about 2 years now. I managed to get in there about a year before the pandemic to have a year of growth, air travel taking off, and then kind of a whole new world. But I work for the city of Philadelphia. The airport is owned and operated by the city of Philadelphia. And, I'm a transplant to Philly, originally from Boston. I've been here for about 15 years. And in that time, I traveled a lot, went through the airport a lot, and just saw how much the airport was growing and changing. Kind of went from the old, like, you can get a hot dog and you can get a Coke thing to bringing in local restaurants. We have 5 different cheesesteaks. And I really saw an opportunity to come here and make sure that everyone in the region knew about how much the airport had evolved and all of the changes that we've been making. And it's been a really experience.
Yeah. I will say, by the way, that I've been in Philadelphia for many years, long before my beard had any gray in it. And I've been amazed at the transformation of the airport from when I first came to what it is today. Although I will say I haven't been to the airport very recently. And so that's part of what it is that we want to end up talking to you about. So can you start us off by giving us some background of basically what's happened during this pandemic and how has it affected the airport? You gave a little bit of an allusion to that, but give us a bigger picture of that.
Yeah. Well, I think the big surprise and the thing that I like to start with is that in a lot of ways, nothing has changed. We have been open and operating every single day over the last year. So the thing that we're dealing with, and I'll talk a little bit about the changes that we're seeing, is that we're seeing this fundamental upheaval in air travel, but at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, we're still coming into the airport, airplanes are still taking off, people are still flying. And so we're trying to deal with this change and this upheaval kind of while the day-to-day operations are still going the way that they always have been. So in practice, the actual upheaval piece of it, our traffic, our passenger volume, the number of people who come through the terminal, October was down 64% from what it had been last year. So a really significant issue. And as you guys know, it's not just us. It's a global issue. The US is a pretty big domestic market, so it's not as pronounced as it is maybe in Europe. But within the US, we are in the Northeast, which is a little bit more down than some of the rest of the country. Relative to the Northeast, Philadelphia is doing okay. But practical impact for us, as I said, I work for the city. The airport is a really robust ecosystem of businesses and organizations. So we have the airlines that operate here. We have food and beverage merchants that operate here, retail, ground transportation, services like wheelchair assistance. And there has been a really practical human cost to that passenger volume going down. When we started, we had about 21,000 badged employees, which means people that had a security clearance to get through security and be in the airport. And we are down to under 19,000 employees today across all of those businesses and organizations that operate here. So there is that human element that comes along with the reduced passenger volume. But at the same time this is happening, like We're seeing different people traveling. They are traveling for different reasons, and they are going to different places.
Yeah.
So, historically, we had a really kind of blend of business travel, leisure travel, and what we call VFR travel, which is visiting friends and relatives. And today, the people who are flying are a lot younger. They're largely flying for what we call VFR reasons. And of course, and they're also flying to leisure destinations like ski and sun destinations. So we have seen some new things come in at the same time that we're seeing this drop. We have a new airline called Eastern Airlines. They're actually just down the road in Wayne. And they are serving a VFR market. They've launched flights to Santo Domingo, to Port-au-Prince in Haiti, and they're launching one to Mexico City. And we've also seen our kind of legacy carriers like American bring in flights to new sun destinations like Cozumel and ski destinations like Vail. So there are still kind of new things that are happening while all this is happening.
So Kate, one of the things that you were mentioning when we began this conversation, clearly some things have remained the same, but perhaps many things have changed. And one of the things that Dave and I, as we've talked to people from other industries as well, have frequently brought up is this issue of trust and the fact that, regardless of whether you are buying a brand or perhaps in this case, traveling, which I think has been quite a big issue for people. What has the airport done in some sense to kind of make sure that the travelers feel comfortable, they trust what's going on and so on?
Yeah, that is job one for us. I mean, that building trust in getting into and through the airport and on your journey is the biggest thing that we're facing right now. So from a marketing team perspective, where we spend our money, where we spend our resources is completely different today than it was last year. We're not spending a ton of money going out there and suggesting that you get on a specific flight, fly to a specific place. We are focused on serving the people who have chosen to travel or have to travel for essential reasons. And we're kind of looking at our role as we've gone from the place where they thought about the airport at the very end, or maybe they thought a little bit about the airport in terms of what's the traffic going to be like as I'm getting there, how much total time am I going to spend on this trip, and does the airport impact that, to people are really researching and thinking about every single place that they're going to stop when they're traveling. So we're seeing a lot more research around the airport, a lot more research around what is going to be open and available to me. What are some of the expectations for me when I'm traveling, including, of course, regulations about the destination that you're going to, regulations about when you're coming back, but also, do I have to wear a mask? Of course, right? What kind of new processes and procedures are in place with TSA? And also, what expectations are there of other travelers, so that I feel really comfortable knowing that not only am I being safe, but that I'm going to be surrounded by people who are following the same safety practices that I'm following.
So as the net result of that, Kate, have you made major modifications to your website so that you have a lot more information to help inform the travelers about what safety they have, what is going to be available, the whole list of things that you were going through that people were doing research on before they ever travel. I'm assuming that has necessitated you making a fair amount of change to your website.
Yes, a fair amount of change to the website, and a fair amount of change, both in terms of what information is surfaced relatively early on in your journey, creating pages that are very findable through natural search, and through the types of things that people are going to be kind of going out there and Googling. But also, I would say, and we have an amazing comms team that puts a lot of energy into this, a lot of content and different types of content that are designed to really bring parts of the experience to life, so that we're not just telling you, yes, we've done everything you expect. There's hand sanitizer, there's markers in the TSA queue. There's things that we've removed some of the seating options from the hold rooms, we've blocked them off, but videos that really demonstrate that so that people can get comfortable with what exactly they should be experiencing when they come through.
So Kate, another question kind of related to that idea. Another thing that has popped up quite a bit is that many organizations find that having an international focus, perhaps, they learn from each other in different parts of the organization. They may not have done so otherwise. So in the case of airports, are there other airports perhaps that you turn towards to kind of see what they've been doing? Are there some practices that should be followed? Perhaps some other practices that you feel are not as important?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with airports is that we're not really that competitive with each other, except in a few select cases. So if you're going on a trip, you are going through two airports as part of that journey. And so we very much look at what other airports are doing regionally, nationally, globally. I think some airports that have done some exceptional work during this time. DFW, because of their location, because of their status, they still are seeing a decent amount of traffic, and they've made a lot of interesting changes to try to make the customer experience a little bit more digital and a little bit more seamless. We are always looking at what the airports in Asia are doing. They operate under a different ownership model than we do, so they have kind of different approaches in how they can bring new ideas to be. And so you really tend to pick inspiration from, Heathrow did this testing thing really interesting, and Seattle put this interesting program into place, and we definitely look at all of them.
So I'm curious, obviously the airlines have been dramatically affected by this, and I'm assuming that their flight schedule has been reduced. I read some of that.
Yeah.
It's not like they're flying all the same flights, just with less, capacity utilization. But I'm also assuming that the retail establishments have been affected significantly.
Yeah.
What have you done to help keep the retail establishments alive?
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I walk down the streets in the neighborhoods, that I see lots of places that have gone out of business. What's the status at the Philadelphia airport?
Yeah, I'm going to start with, I probably can't talk in great detail just for me personally about the exact programs that we put into place to help support our concessionaires, although they do exist, and I could bring in somebody to answer those questions. The financial programs. So we put financial programs into place that are designed to alleviate some of the pressure of trying to serve the airport and customers at the same time. From a more what's happening on a day-to-day basis, not all of our program is open right now. We're trying to be really, we are taking an approach toward reopening our concessions program that is very much based on the employment forecasts that we have and understanding what traffic we're going to see coming through the facility. So I will say that, relative to some other airports, we have tried to put financial arrangements in place with our concessionaires that have allowed a number of them to be open. And we had more of our program open relative to other airports pretty early. But we've also really tried to look for creative solutions to help them connect with the passengers who are coming through and potentially even expand their reach a little bit. So even before the pandemic, we had launched a program called orderatphl.com that our merchants can sign up for and sell their food through online. So you can be in the terminal, order a cheesesteak, and then walk right up to the cheesesteak place and grab it. During the pandemic, we actually added delivery onto that.
Oh, interesting.
Privacy and having kind of a safe space that you're comfortable at is so important for our guests. So now you can come into the airport, decide, you know what, this is great. I feel really comfortable right here and I want to stay here. Dial up Chickies and Pete's, dial up Smashburger on your phone, and somebody will actually bring the food over to you no matter where you're sitting in the airport. And we were able to, that's.
Wow. They'll take it to the gate where you're waiting?
They will take it to your gate. They will take it to baggage claim. As long as you can get them approximately to the vicinity of where you are, to the vicinity, track you down. And they might deliver to offices also. But we actually used that program to partner with our Marriott when it was over the summer and they closed down some of their food and beverage options. We were able to help some of our concessionaires drive sales by partnering with the Marriott to use our food and beverage options and get them delivered into the hotel that's attached to the airport.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, one of the things, Kate, that gets me very excited is the use of analytics, use of data, perhaps to drive decisions. And I can imagine, if you go back a few months, beginning of March, April, obviously, a lot more chaos. And and perhaps a lot more unpredictability in that, previous data perhaps is not as predictive of what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But has the use of in the forecasting models that you mentioned, kind of looking at the traffic that's coming up now, has it become a lot more useful again in the last few months, where it has been more of an uptick?
Yeah, yes. One of the things that the airport luckily did right before the pandemic is we hired a new air service development director.
Mhm.
So somebody had joined us in January of 2020, whose job is to bring new carriers in, bring in new service from our airlines. And, that job looks a little different today than it probably did when she started in January. But she's been really amazing about making sure that everyone throughout the facility is equipped with the forecasts that are going to enable us to right-size operations, right-size concessions, and do, of course, budgetary and financial planning as well. But as much as we say, oh, the early days were when it was most chaotic, I think we are still living with a lot of uncertainty.
I can imagine, yeah.
And, anytime a regulation changes, whether it's in the US or in a destination that we serve, anytime kind of expectations of the passenger change around, if and when they need to get tested, if and when they need to quarantine, and really anytime guidance comes out that suggests that maybe you should or should not travel, that can have a relatively short-term impact for us. So we're still, not, I wouldn't say day to day with everything, but there are a lot of pretty frequent changes, and which we've learned to deal with a lot better through things like data.
Yep.
So thinking about dealing with COVID and travel, we hear about some airlines mandating tests before you can travel. Is there any of that happening within the airport? And are you structuring it in any way so that you could come to the airport and be tested and do one of those quick tests and get results before you get on a flight, as well as those who are arriving and getting tested? And I'm sort of curious as to how it is that Philadelphia Airport has been responding to that.
Yeah. So I will preface this saying that typically the people or the entity that is deciding whether or not testing is a requirement for travel is the destination that you're going to.
Okay.
So the airline's role in that is typically to facilitate or ensure that people who are traveling to that destination are equipped with a test result that will allow them to actually come to that destination, or ensure that anybody who's traveling who thinks that they either need or want for their safety or other safety access to a recent test, just again to feel more confident and build that trust on where you're going. Sometimes airlines offer that. So we at the airport do have a testing facility. And you can, if you are flying out of PHL, access that testing facility for either a PCR test, which you would come a couple of days in advance for, or a rapid antigen test. But it is still very much on the passenger to understand the current rules of the or regulations of the destination that they're going to, and ensure that they are getting the right test and that'll grant them access to that destination.
Sure.
Oh, great point. So I think this was very interesting, like the one that you mentioned about, next time I'm in the airport, I'm going to try out the, place your order and get the pickup
Yes.
or the delivery. And so with that in mind, I think, as you can imagine, customer journey, I think very first few points that you mentioned have dramatically changed in the sense that, the airport is not just, I'm just flying there, I'm getting out. I want to know exactly what's happening. So perhaps mobile has become a lot more important.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other changes you feel that would perhaps become important or have become important and will perhaps even last after the pandemic is done? Something that has fundamentally changed in the way people travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that actually isn't that different for air travel from some other industries is that a lot of the changes that we have seen over the last 10 months now is an acceleration of some of the trends we were actually seeing before the pandemic. So what you mentioned already, like people really very much want to be on their own devices and they are trying to kind of touch and interact with as few things as possible. So we are using people's devices, biometrics in an airport environment, which we don't have a ton of yet, but facial scanning to allow people to have fewer interactions, breeze through queues. But beyond that, we've seen a shift from people wanting space for themselves to people wanting privacy. So we were lucky in that a couple of our lounges did open relatively early. One of our American Admirals Club lounges, our American Express Centurion lounge, and our Minute Suites kind of quasi lounge, which has rooms that you can rent, all opened pretty early because a lot of our passengers really were looking for that, space and privacy, where they could, feel confident that they had their own little world to themselves. I think, so that's a big new luxury for us. The other thing that we've seen really change that I mentioned earlier is our passengers are a lot younger. We went from being a slightly older skewing airport to an airport that has a lot of people who are in their 20s, early 30s traveling through. So with that, we've seen, again, a lot more demand for digital solutions, a lot more demand for people to access information on their device, and a lot more, I think, comfort with the fact that expectations are changing really quickly and you need to be able to change with them. But I think possibly for us, one of the biggest innovations to come out of this is that air travel has kind of, with some exceptions, looked really the same year after year. People tend to be going to the same places, the same destinations tend to be, popular year after year. And now, as we said, people are very much traveling for different reasons. They are very much, going to different places. And we think the fact that we are going to need to be more reactive to faster changes in where people want to travel and why is going to stick with us. And obviously, I think the big elephant in the room is we don't really know to what degree and when business travel will come back.
So one of the things that I hear, Kate, is and feel is all this pent up demand for, I can't wait to start traveling again when it's safe.
Yeah.
And so while we don't know exactly when that's going to be, I'm very curious what it is that the airport is doing in anticipation of this, this latent demand that is there, that just is ready to get out and start traveling again. And are there any things that you in the airport are doing to sort of prepare for that?
Yeah, I think one of the big themes that you see in air travel, and you see this from the airlines as well, is we're working as hard as we can to keep as much capacity and as many resources in place as possible, so that when that demand starts to come back, we have the infrastructure and the people and the ability to serve it. So, you had asked questions earlier about our concessions program. Working as hard as we can to keep, our concessions viable, getting the business that they can get, keeping as much of our team engaged as we possibly can. And again, working with our business partners like our airlines, we have the routes out of Philadelphia to the destinations that people in our region want to be able to get to make sure that we are still there and able to serve them as fully as possible once we get to the other end of this. In a more practical sense, we've made a number of changes to different parts of the journey, from how you access the airport. So one of the things that we did, just to be precise about it, is we actually closed our economy lot pretty early in this process, because you have to shuttle from the economy lot to the terminal. And so there was an opportunity for us to remove one of the places where customers were most concerned about safety on their journey and put some cost savings into place for us at the same time. So what we did is we opened our garage lot to anyone who is traveling, and we actually put a discounted rate into place for people who are traveling for more than 3 days, which we had never had before. Anybody who's traveling can come, park in the garage, and walk into the terminals and feel really comfortable and confident about their trip. Those types of things, won't go away immediately the second travel starts to rebound. So our commitment here is really to, continue to build on some of the changes that we've made in the facility to make people feel safer and build that trust with them. And then continue to listen to our passengers and continue to make changes based on, whatever it is that they need to feel safe and secure at that moment.
No, great points. And I think, Kate, I mean, again, if I had to summarize in a few ways, I think obviously the airport was already perhaps customer centric, but I guess if there's a silver lining here is perhaps you become even more customer centric.
Yeah,
To understand exactly where people are going, why are they going, what can we do in some sense to perhaps interact with them in ways that they feel comfortable with.
yeah.
Now, as we are kind of closing out this session, I would love to hear your thoughts and your guidance, advice to other people who are kind of going through a similar situation. Where what would be, the last few months have been a big learning experience for all of us,
Yeah.
for you as well. So, what would be some, pieces of advice that you would have for other decision makers?
Yeah. I think we're probably doing a lot of the same things that other people that are in a similar situation are. But for us, it's been a lot of listen to your customers, make sure that you understand how your customers are changing in terms of who they are, and what it is that they really want and need from you and your brand at this moment. And, to whatever degree possible, be as responsive as you can to those changing needs. And in the cases where making the changes that they need are beyond what you can accomplish in the short term, being as transparent as possible with the changes that you are trying to make and the ways in which you are serving them with that goal of building trust, rebuilding trust, and being there for them in the long term.
Kate, this has been very, very interesting during extremely challenging times. And as I said at the outset, I can't imagine an industry that's been more affected than air travel. And you're right at the hub, if I could say that, of it. Um, Last question, and it's going to be a one-word answer, I think,
Okay.
which is, do you have a favorite airport, and other than the Philadelphia airport, what would be your favorite airport?
I mean, it's always only ever going to be Philadelphia International Airport. But in terms of the places where I love to travel to, I really love the airport in Keflavik in Reykjavik in Iceland. I think they are a very interesting airport in terms of processing a lot of connecting traffic, of people who are quickly getting through their facility onto somewhere else, but also kind of bringing Iceland into the airport experience for you.
That's great. Okay, I look forward to experiencing that. I'm also going to see if I can get Chicky and Pete's to deliver out to Bryn Mawr, but I'm going to work on that. So
Well, we
anyhow,
will take curbside soon, so you can drive on up and we will bring the cheesesteak out to you.
I like it. I like it. So anyhow, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us. This has been Raghu and Dave Reibstein that have been joined by Kate Sullivan from the Philadelphia Airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.